Good morning and welcome again to the weekly joint Republican media availability. Thank you for joining us. I know this is early on a Monday morning. I'm Kim Wirtz, Communications Director for Senate Republicans. Today we're joined by Senate Republican Leader John Braun from the 20th District, Senate Republican Floor Leader Shelley Short from the 7th District, House Republican Leader J.T. Wilcox from the 2nd District, and House Republican Assistant Floor Leader Chris Corey from the 14th District. Quick housekeeping note, in awareness of tight scheduling this morning, we're going to end today right at 9:25. If you've not gotten a chance to ask your question by then, you can email it to me afterward. You can also let me know in the chat box that you do have a question and we'll get you worked in. And now I'll turn it over to Senator Braun for opening comments.
Well, thank you, Kim, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to keep it pretty brief since we have a tight schedule today. We obviously have fiscal cutoff today. It's going to be a busy day in Ways and Means, and I assume appropriates on the other side of the rotunda. Then we get into floor action. Lots of interesting bills out there. We're going to stay focused on exactly what we've been focused on from the beginning: restoring public safety, returning affordability to the state of Washington for working families, and rebuilding trust in state and local government. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Wilcox.
Well, thank you very much, John. I just got off the phone with Representative Stokesbury, who gave me a rundown on what is going on in appropriations, and I think his evaluation is, it's not as busy as it is sometimes, and it seems like there's less issues of substance. We've used up a pretty good part of the first half of our session fixing bills that were passed a few years ago that were, I think, improperly advanced without a lot of input from the minority and from the people of Washington. One thing I tell people over and over is a little known value in having a loyal opposition is that it can be used to prevent the majority from making mistakes. And unfortunately, I think the approach that's been taken for the last few years of just proceeding with ideological bills has meant that there's been a lot of mistakes to fix. I've got a few disappointments, I think, with cutoff. First of all, I've talked a lot about Dan Griffey's retail theft bill, 1656. I really thought that that had a chance to pass. Everybody in Washington, especially in the largest cities in Washington, understand that their retail sector is under threat, and that in many cases, the real victims are people that don't have transportation of their own and want to have a neighborhood retail district that is thriving. And that's not happening. And unfortunately, the majority decided not to take steps that seemed like common sense to help address those things. Another that is a somewhat similar thing is a very, very common sense bill, Maycomber's 1536, that would have recognized that although all agree on how critically important vocational training is now, not everybody can access it. And all she was trying to do was provide access for people that don't have a skills center around the corner. Public safety continues to be a very big thing. It was really, I think, a lot of drama in the Public Safety Committee in the House recently, where some major bills to fix the disastrous police reform from last year were advanced. The Democratic leaders promised that those would be advanced, but they only advanced because there were a lot of Republican votes available for those. The majority party decided that in many cases they didn't want to provide that kind of relief for the people of Washington. Looking forward to all of your questions. Glad you're here, and I guess we don't have that much time left.
Okay, with that, we'll move to Rachel LaCourte from AP. Rachel, did you have a question? Rachel? Okay, we'll come.
Sorry, no, I'm here. Sorry. For Representative Wilcox, since you're part of the Executive Rules Committee, are you aware of any changes to floor protocols that may be decided this week following the Senate's move last week?
Yeah, we had a visit Friday, I think it was, and there's going to be a slight expansion in the number of people that are on the floor, not as significant as the House. And I am surprised that hasn't been announced. As far as I know, there's no glitches in that.
Okay, and then for Representative Corey, I think I saw him on the call. Is that correct? Okay, so for him, on your executive powers bill, have you had any discussions with House chairs that make you optimistic that elements of your bill may be incorporated into the Senate version if that one clears that chamber and comes over to the House?
Good question, Rachel. Thank you. Yeah, we were obviously disappointed that 1772 didn't get moved out of committee, given kind of the broad support it had. I have been talking with House Democrats about ways we can improve the Senate bill and include elements from 1772 in that. So I'm hopeful if it reaches the House, we can improve the bill and make it something that we can have a unanimous vote out of the chamber on.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Austin Jenkins from Northwest Cable News, or from Northwest News, sorry. Rough morning. Austin, go ahead. Austin? Okay. Sounds like we're having technical difficulties, Austin. We're unable to hear you, but if you text me your question, I'll ask it for you.
Senator Braun, this is a question for you. I have no homes down in your, hear me? Good morning.
I only got that it was a question for me. I didn't get the actual question.
Austin, go ahead and text me your question and I'll see if I can ask it for you since we're unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's not too late, I wanted to ask Senator Braun about building tiny houses and doing so at scale to meet the demand for housing right now, emergency, housing. I noticed in your district that there seemed to be some tiny homes for rent along I-5. I think it's on the east side of the freeway. I don't know if you know anything about those, but I saw them and thought that design could be scaled at a much higher level. Do you have any thoughts on this? Like, why aren't we building thousands of these things quickly?
Well, thanks for the question, Austin. There is a group of small houses, tiny houses just north on the east side of the freeway from our plant on I-5. And it's interesting, those houses were built and are being rented entirely by a private individual who has found a way to work himself through the cumbersome regulatory environment and do good work for the people of Lewis County and provide housing at an affordable rate. It would be nice if we could peel back some of the regulations and allow that to happen on a broader scale around the state. And my point is, certainly this is something the state and local governments can and are investing in, and I have no opposition to that. But if we're going to solve our larger housing problem in our state, we have to bring in private developers that are willing to do this. And this is a good example where private developers will accommodate, the what's available to them to provide housing if we get out of their way.
Austin, did you have a quick follow-up?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. And then we'll go to Keith Eldridge from Como.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for taking the question. Just checking on, I talked to Senator Braun on this on Friday, but the bill for commutations heading to the House now. So Leader Wilcox, the question for you, are you going to block the bill that could potentially let people like Gary Ridgway out of prison someday?
Well, I think it's a pretty good bet that we'll have 41 Republicans against that. It depends on whether the majority wants to continue to advance that. I think it's a shock that the majority in the Senate would be willing to do that. People all over the state of Washington are telling us that they're worried about crime. And it's almost beyond belief that the Democrats are willing to advance a bill that is good for a handful of the most heinous criminals in the history of Washington. That's a terrible priority, and it's a terrible signal to send to people that just want to have peace in their neighborhoods and want to have retail sector so that they can shop for food and shop for necessities. And we're worried about Gary Ridgway.
You know, Keith, if I could follow up, one of the interesting points that was made during our Senate floor debate was that this process that this bill, thinks about is going to be thorough, it's going to be vetted. And I'm like, wait a minute, the current statutes around this issue are already, very thorough. It's actually a very high bar for prisoners to be able to have their sentences commuted. So I thought it was interesting that they chose those words, because why then wouldn't you support, the underlying laws as they are? So I think there's definitely a move to change to make it easier, but that wasn't going to be their statement on the floor.
And I had a follow-up for Representative Wilcox again. So you were talking about Public Safety Committee use of force, the definition. There were several members, Jenny Graham among them, saying that it doesn't go far enough, that are obviously going to be some amendments. How strong are you going to push to from your perspective, strengthen the resumption of tactics for police?
Well, I think we're going to continue to offer additional options so that it's a tool that, using the same terms I've been talking about for a year and a half now, we want to preserve the tools that are necessary for police to keep us safe. And at the same time, we want to make it as unlikely as possible that they're going to be misused. And I think we've had a lot of public discussion about this. I think the position of the public has become very plain. We want to have reasonable suspicion as the the determination as to whether or not you can detain someone. And in talking to some of the most qualified law enforcement people in Washington, that bill needs to go just a little bit farther, and we're going to try to help do that.
Okay, and next we'll go to Jeff Pojla also from Como.
Well, actually now from KNWN, changed our call letters, Northwest.
Thank you for announcing that.
Shifting gears a little bit, the people on this call right now are the top Republicans in Washington State. Wanted to get your reaction to what happened with the RNC on Friday, censuring Adam Kitzinger and Liz Cheney, and essentially declaring the insurrection at the Capitol legitimate political discourse. As I said, you guys are the top Republicans in the state. What's the reaction?
Well, first, Jeff, we have our heads down doing a session where people count on us to take care of public safety in this Washington, take care of the budget, try to return some of people's hard-earned dollars to them under conditions of increasing inflation. And I know John as well, have spoken out very aggressively in this. I did a long interview with Matt Driscoll from the Tacoma News Tribune. He caught me at a moment when I felt like being pretty aggressive, and I stand by everything that I said then.
Yeah, same, Jeff. We've been very clear on what I've been very clear on what I think of the events of January 6th, 2021. Nothing there has changed, and we're really, that's not what we're hearing from folks around the state of Washington. We're hearing about the exact things I mentioned before. We're hearing about public safety. We're hearing about the affordability for working families in the state of Washington. We're feeling about a large distrust in state government. We're working to mend that in a way that brings better state government to people in the state of Washington.
Did you have a follow-up, Jeff?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. And then we will go to Jerry Cornfield from the Everett Herald. Go ahead, Jerry.
Good morning. Thank you. Transportation tomorrow, the Democrats are rolling out their transportation package. And I was told that they would brief you folks in the two caucuses ahead of their rollout. I wondered, have you been briefed on what's in that package? If so, what have you seen? What have you liked or dislike?
To my knowledge, no one in the Senate Republican caucus has been briefed on this package. We've had, I know that Senator King and Senator Elias met last week, but no details on the package was shared other than they were going to announce, basically a a partisan package tomorrow, hoping that we could support it. That's not the way we've seen transportation done in our state for decades. It's always been a bipartisan process. For whatever reason, the majorities have chosen to build an entire package by themselves, hoping that because we have been broadly supportive of a transportation package, we would just come along without really truly being involved. So that's pretty disappointing. From my perspective, I am encouraged that we're trying to get a transportation package put together, but really should be something we work on together and work for the entire state of Washington, not just something the majorities do.
Yeah, I think this has been a bizarre process. Representative Andrew Barkus rolled out his package back in early December. And there was no official response from Democrats, at least as of the last time I talked to him, which I think was Friday. He hadn't been briefed on this. And it's crazy to fail to take advantage of the fact that we've never had so much commonality when it comes to transportation as we have this time, and then to wait until the midpoint of the session to finally bring one out. And by the way, I'd also refer you, I know it's on tape, there was a forum for AWC last week, and the speaker mentioned that she wasn't sure that there was enough time to do a package. It would have helped to have started working with everyone in the legislature a little earlier. And then she also said that if there was a lot of process, I'm going to get this a little wrong, so please check the actual quotes. She also said something like, if there's a lot of questions or a lot of amendments, then there probably isn't time. That's the approach that's been used on all of these disastrous bills that have been getting us into trouble. And I think if they were serious about a transportation package, we would have been talking long ago, and there would be some room for debate, questions, and amendments rather than talking about how little time we have.
Jerry, did you have a follow-up?
Just staying on the same theme, there are some elements that are well known. One of is both the governor's proposed and Democrats have said they plan to use general fund dollars, several $100 million for this package. Just because I thought about that specific element, if it's something you could support as part of the process.
So absolutely. Look, we've been pushing for 4+ years on the using general fund dollars to support transportation. And I've said over and over this session and before this session, based on the revenues we've seen and the very strong underlying budget that's fully funded, we can afford today to invest in changing the future of our transportation funding in the state of Washington. You know, whether you do it like we have proposed on both sides of the rotunda, the Republicans have proposed using sales tax on motor vehicles, or there's a dozen other ways you could do it. But fundamentally, the idea that gas tax is no longer a viable long-term funding source for transportation. Operating budget has the room to do that without affecting services, without affecting growth in the budget, and get us off this 3-decade-old addiction to gas tax and bonding gas tax that we don't know doesn't have a future. So, you know, the idea that they're using general funds is great. I fully support it. I think I can't speak for all Republicans, but I believe most Republicans, if not all, support that. The only disappointing thing is we have a chance today, this session, if we were to work together, to make a legacy move in transportation funding that would change our transportation system for the next 2-3 decades. And unfortunately, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I had a conversation with the governor about this last week, and I got a kick out of him. He said that he must have missed the press release that I issued, finding that there was a lot in common with his original proposal. But the truth is, he made a proposal, publicized it early, and there are things that all of us could support. And I just cannot understand why the Democrats in the House and Senate have taken this opportunity and made it so difficult to achieve. And I would hope that we find enough commonality so that we get there at the end of the session. But the process that they've chosen, I think, is the one that's least likely to succeed.
Okay. And it looks like we're getting close to time here. So probably our last question will come from Brooklynn Hille from WNPA.
Good morning. My question is for anyone who would like to comment. So with the budget surplus, tax relief has been a frequent topic at this year's session, but with today being the fiscal cutoff, it seems few tax relief bills will actually make it to the floor. What kind of conversation has there been regarding these bills, and why has there been such little movement when a few have received such bipartisan support?
Well, I wouldn't write them off just yet. Some of the tax bills affected by the budget are exempt from cutoff, so we still have the opportunity to hear those bills and bring them forward in the second half of session. That said, I am a little disappointed, maybe a lot disappointed, that we haven't had a whole lot of eagerness when it comes to majority to send some of the money back to the state of Washington. We've had one proposal that in the Senate that reduced from a Democrat, they reduced the sales tax. Nearly every single Republican in the chamber signed on to that bill. We think it's a great idea. We have some other great ideas. Reduce the gas tax for 1 year. We have an omnibus tax bill that helps across a number of different business sectors and also affects property taxes. We think it's a great bill. So these are still possible, although given it doesn't look like the majorities are all that interested at this point.
Well, in Brooklyn, if I might weigh in on that, to look at what our majority friends are doing, they've got a bill to increase capital gains. So here we had this bill passed last year, it's in the courts, and you're going to take, less than a year later, you're going to take a stab at increasing that. So quote unquote, the rich pay their fair share. And I just think that shows the difference between what we would do and what they consider doing.
Refer to Chris.
Yeah, thank you, JT. I think we have ample opportunity to show the citizens of the state of Washington that we mean business when it comes to putting more money back in their pocket, whether it is they have a great proposal to temporarily cut back the gas tax sales. It makes a lot of sense when you think about what we're paying at the pump due to insane inflation. There was meaningful tax relief overall. I personally don't support a sales tax holiday. I feel like that's doesn't benefit the people in a meaningful way. I mean, it's, every little bit helps, but I think we should do stuff that's bold for the people and what gives them their money back. Another proposal we had was Representative Stokesbury and I expanding the working family tax credit to help those most in need in our state. And I'm hoping that we pick up some more steam with that and get that done this year.
Okay. And we are almost out of time. Senator Braun, would you like to, or Representative Wilcox, would you like to wrap up with some quick closing comments?
I would only say, as I said earlier, we're going to stay focused on public safety, and we got some important bills to work through. We're going to look through every bill that comes across the floor in the Senate through a lens of affordability. What's that's doing for working families? Is it making it more or less affordable for folks to live in Washington, raise a family? And if it's not, then we need to push back. And we're going to continue to work in good faith on emergency power bills and other items to try to rebuild trust in state government.
Well, I'll go back to taxes for a moment. We've heard for at least a decade criticism of the tax system in the state of Washington. We've heard that it's regressive. We have this year historic opportunity with the largest surpluses anyone has ever dreamed about here that are not going to be around forever to actually reform taxes by reducing the burden on working people of Washington. And so far, it doesn't look like there's actually any interest on the part of the majority to do that, in spite of a lot of good bills that have been offered.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll go ahead and end there, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.